Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's bonus edition webinar. We are very looking forward to today's fireside chat with some of our favorite people here at Bonusly, who you'll meet here in a little bit. But as everyone starts to trickle in, we'd love to hear where you all are tuning in from. My name's David. I am on the marketing team here at Bonusly, and I am calling in from Jacksonville, Florida. Fun story. We were just in Vegas for the Transform conference, and I stayed for a few more days and went camping around in Death Valley, but came back to Jacksonville, and it is just the best weather now. Spring is always such a happy time. I feel like no matter where you are in the country, but definitely, Florida is beautiful this time. I know Hope's from Florida too. But just let us know where you are calling in from. I'm sure we have people from all across the states. But we are just so excited that you all are here today. Like I said, my name is David, and we just have a few housekeeping things to go over before we get started. One is Zoom. So Zoom always defaults to having you chat with host and panelists for some reason. But feel free to, you'll see that little arrow clicking to where you can switch it to everyone. So that way you can chat with everyone. We love for our webinars to be engaging. So we'd love to hear your thoughts throughout the webinar. Drop your LinkedIn's. We'd love for you to connect with each other and with our fellow panelists. And then throughout the conversation, we have a handful of questions to talk through with our panelists. But we also want you all to ask questions. We had a few of you submit questions via email when you registered, but throughout the conversation, feel free to put any and all questions in that Q&A box, and we will save some time at the end. But again, we are so thankful for you all joining us live for this webinar. If you have to hop early, no worries. We'll share the recording out with you all in the next couple of days. But with that, I will first off share our panelists' LinkedIn's with you all so you can connect with them. And I will pass it over to Debra Squyres to introduce them.
Thanks so much, David. I'm Debra Squyres. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Bonusly. I too was at Transform last week and had such a great time talking with all of the participants there about what recognition done right is and all the ways that it can go wrong when giving recognition. And we thought it was really important to bring a group of subject matter experts together to share what's at stake as it relates to recognition and how it impacts the workplace culture, engagement, and ultimately business performance. And like many things in life, there is no perfect recipe for getting it right, but there are many ways to get it wrong. And so we wanted to give you a chance to really understand not only what's at stake, but how to think about delivering meaningful, timely, specific recognition that not only helps people realize when they're doing a great job, but also helps people to improve and see what good looks like. So there's lots of ways that you can incorporate that. But let's start by meeting our panelists. And rather than me introducing our panelists, I'm going to pass it over to them, and I'll ask them to share where they're calling from or where they're joining from, a little bit about their role in their company and background, and then maybe cap it off with what's the worst piece of recognition you've ever gotten. And I'll start with Hope.
All right. Hey, everybody. Super excited to be here. My name is Hope Weatherford, and I lead the people team for Fountain. If you have not heard of Fountain, Fountain is a frontline workforce management platform for hourly workforce management. We use AI automation to cater to the unique needs of the hourly workforce, and we offer end-to-end services. Really thinking about it from the very beginning part of attracting, hiring, managing, and retaining. So really excited to be here. I am calling in from Florida, Northwest Florida. So fun fact, I am so far west that I am in the Central Time Zone. So yeah, and gosh, what is the worst recognition? I feel like I've got two, but I'm going to go with the one that was like my first gut feeling, and it was getting more work. Sometimes that's a really good thing, and sometimes you're like, oh, okay, what's going on? But yeah, that's the one for me. And Holly, would you like to go next?
I will, because I started giggling as you were talking, Hope. I'm going to start with my worst piece of recognition. And I was going to go with more work as well, because let's be honest, all of these achievers, I know most of you who are on this call right now are also achievers. We're used to that, getting assigned more work for good work. So I was 23 years old. I was living alone and I didn't cook. And my good job reward was a ham. I didn't know what to do with it. It was so big and heavy and bulky. I put it in a seatbelt when I drove home that day. So my name is Holly McElwain. I am from Western Pennsylvania, glorious Beaver County, just northwest of Pittsburgh. And I'm the talent development partner for Winter Partners. My work is all about equipping leaders to really be the best version of themselves, to have a positive impact on the organizations that they work into. We work in retained executive search, but man, I'm a life changer. So I work with people everywhere, every industry, anyone who's hungry. And so recognition done right is so, so critical to me. And I'm happy to be here. And I am going to be passing this beautiful baton on to my beautiful friend. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikisha Dixon. I am currently living in Northern Virginia, but I'm originally from New York. So I'm trying to slow down my fast talking, which is so common of a New Yorker. I have worked in human resources and leadership for about 20 years, most recently a part of an organization that was private equity owned. And so I'm very, very familiar of mergers and acquisitions. The worst case or the worst recognition I ever received, I was really young and I was trying to really impress my boss and I said, "Oh, don't worry about my raise. If it was during the recession and I was like, if we can't do raises, then don't worry because I foolishly thought he was going to say, "Oh, I would never forget about your raise." But he said, "You know what? You're such a great worker. You're so diligent and dependable. Thank you for giving up your raise." So I don't know if it's recognition that I falsely thought was okay or not, but it still has me think back, and it's been almost 20 years.
Wow, that's a hard one. Goodness. So I forgot to tell you where I was coming to you from. I'm in North Texas, in Fort Worth. Cowtown is what we like to call it here locally. It's the best city in Texas. So excited to be joining you all today. And the worst piece of recognition that I've ever gotten was an encouragement. And there's an example of this, but I promise you it wasn't mine. This was not what I put on Reddit. But we'll show you some examples of what we found on Reddit, publicly shared about recognition that was provided to people, and just get your take and the take of the panel on how impactful and meaningful these forms of recognition were. So we'll have a little fun to get started. But the topic today is recognition done right. We want to empower you to walk away from this conversation with actionable insights on how you can take your recognition practices and strategy to the next level. Really focused on delivering meaningful, impactful, personalized recognition that ties what you're seeing and how you're seeing people show up to do their work or to be a good teammate or to live the company values, and how that really can have positive impact, not only on that individual, but their entire team and the entire company. So we'll focus in on that. But first, a few visual cues into what you can find readily available across the internet of examples where people received recognition that didn't quite resonate. So we'll pause on each one and just gather insights. So if you're a member of the audience, please share your thoughts and reactions in the chat. That will keep it lively. And I'll just ask the panelists to take yourselves off mute and just share any initial reactions to these forms of recognition. So the first one is what looks like a bag of nothing, but if you zoom in on that comment or the card on the bag of nothing, it says, "I know this bag looks empty, but it's actually filled with our love." So immediate reactions from the panelists and from the participants.
I'll go first. Yuck, I want your money. But
Mhm.
I was thinking love doesn't pay the bills, but
Yeah.
and neither
I
does
mean,
pizza.
Empty is empty. It's empty. The good news is you can at least fill it with snacks from the office snack bar and bring it home. It's a clean Ziploc.
Okay, it is like really, as somebody Nicole wrote in the chat, almost kind of rude. Agreed. Maybe I don't live back. Like, why are you trying to put your love on me?
Yeah.
There's a whole separate session we could do on that whole love in the workplace bit. Love it. Okay, who doesn't love mandatory fun? Does anybody have stories or examples of mandatory fun?
We had mandatory office lunches every Wednesday. Every employee needed to show up, and boy, wasn't it fun.
It's so much fun. Yeah.
Especially on potluck day.
I'm lactose intolerant, so this is not something to be
Not a
excited
great
about.
thing.
No.
Not a great thing. I mean, I'm not anti-pizza, but don't force me to eat it, and don't use that as your recognition or approach to thanking me for a job well done.
Great.
All right. Encouragement. This is what I was talking about. It came, my form came in a role of lifesavers. So I got the whole spearmint ring. At least I got high value gift, right? So yeah, be thankful to your coworkers, give them encouragement, thank them for their commitment, thank them for their investment, and thank them for their involvement. But what sticks out about this particular note?
Well, for me, if it was wintergreen, it's even worse. Like a wintergreen mint is not for me. Like this one, I don't even know. I don't even know what I would do. Probably just leave it and be like, you can have this back.
I love where it's you're beating plan by $6 million and your thank you is a 5 cents mint. I hope they have
yeah.
How big does plan need to be in order for $6 million to warrant a single mint?
Right.
I mean, right?
And like, I love a good play on words, but I also am a stickler for proper spelling. So this frustrates me on like such a level.
Okay.
Things we didn't know about Holly before. Okay. All right. Who has had ice cream as their appreciation?
Oh.
And if you can't see the comment underneath, I almost can't say it, an unintentionally accurate depiction of exactly how much he values you. Craziness.
So cute.
Right? Cute. All right. And how about the obligatory you rock rock? What's really funny about this is I posted something like this on LinkedIn, and one of our customers, Jessie at JS Perkins, responded showing what she had got previously in her career. Like, she took a picture of what she received, which was a you rock rock that looked mysteriously like this one.
Wow. Off to Amazon to see.
Yes.
Can we order these as a joke?
Yes, exactly. And then this very personalized thank you card that is typed out and printed. Totally impersonal, right? Yeah. So probably all of these, when people were preparing them, weren't thinking in terms of offending others, but it's gotten to the point where people are really not appreciative of being appreciated in this way, and they're getting really vocal about it. You can find multiple posts on social media, on Reddit, of examples like this. We didn't include it this time, but there is a very famous hamburger company, fast food company, who gives out what looks like a hockey puck in the shape of a hamburger for the 30th anniversary of somebody. Wow. Nothing says thanks for like the bulk of your life being spent here, like, a piece of what looks like a hockey puck sitting on your desk. So I'm going to stop sharing for now so that we can have a more meaningful conversation. And I know we made light of that. Again, I think best laid plans and intentions don't do the trick. And we know the impact of recognition on engagement and culture, and ultimately individual, team, and business performance. And so let's just start in grounding with our panelists here. What does it mean when recognition is done right? Holly, why don't you kick us off?
For sure. So one of the things that I really like to think with leaders about is being strategic about recognition being part of the flow and the cycle of business, not just on an obligatory day, like it's Employee Appreciation Day, everybody do this thing. No, let's tie it to meaningful metrics and actually be thoughtful about it. And so I'll give you a quick example. One of the companies I was with had a really tough Q4. It was always like all hands on deck, super stressful, but one of their core values was care. And so, knowing that we had a dispersed workforce, demonstrating care together was sometimes hard. So, we put together this campaign called Knock Your Socks Off, where everyone got to participate and be recognized for participation by receiving a kooky pair of company logo socks. But here's the thing, it wasn't just recognition for participation and knowing we're doing a hard thing. We actually got the socks when we donated socks to a local charity that distributed them to people that were homeless and in need. That's recognition done right, and it makes it sticky. And so, yeah, I'm not a fan of the one day a year thing. I'm a fan of let's do it a lot and make it meaningful and tie it to a metric, a purpose, and a value.
Yeah, and I think kind of Holly going a little bit deeper into that is when you can make recognition more personal and you can tie it to um, the company's values, your team's values, all of the things that make a company work, regardless if it's in person, if it's hybrid, if it's fully remote. Fully remote tends to be like a little bit harder in doing that. So you have to have that anchor that these are metrics, values, your team values. And when you can really tie that in with the values of that person, and it's not just like, oh, everybody gets this thing, but you can really showcase the value of what they're doing and how it ties back. And that can be something as simple as literally you have your company values, you're on a call with someone. It doesn't have to come from leadership. It can come from your peers. Sometimes that's the best recognition that there really is. And you just have get some business cards with your values on there. And every time you're in a call and you see somebody who's really portraying those values, you just pop the card up. If you're in a remote environment or even in person, just pop the card up and you're like, wow, you're leading with, radical empathy or whatever those values are that, tie back to that moment and tie back to your company. I think the more personal you can make it and the more real time you can make it really goes a long way. And then it also helps foster that culture of being able to feel comfortable giving recognition to others and not waiting for that special moment.
Yeah, and just to probably build off of what Holly and Hope said is that, especially thinking about the culture, right? We talked about the organizational missions, visions, and values, but when you think about recognition, put your culture first because you want recognition to be genuine. I remember when I was a consultant and I would go in and they would say, well, build a recognition and rewards plan. I would first say, what's your culture like? Because if your culture is not in alignment to the recognition, I'll give you an example. If you're in a micromanaged culture and you're saying we want to do an employee lunch or an employee get together, your employees might cringe with hanging out with management. So we need to be very aware of your culture and what that looks like for recognition. You might just be, I know I talk about money a lot. You might just be better off giving the bonus versus trying to hold a big get together where you're going to want to talk to your employees. They may not want to talk to you. So that genuine aspect is very important.
Yeah. What I hear each of you referencing beyond, making it personal, making it aligned to the values and making it in real time is actually knowing your audience and know what resonates for the individuals, which can vary from one person to the next in the workplace, right? Um, Oftentimes we mix recognition with the rewards aspect. And while both are important, recognition can really drive not only the feel good factor, but also the do good, driving, in Holly's example, donation to charity. In many other examples, you can find direct linkage between recognition and company business performance. So how have you all seen effective recognition directly impact the business outcomes?
I mean, a little competition is a really good thing. So I'm super competitive only with myself, not with other people. I like turn inward when I have to compete with other people. But that idea that I can compete with myself and push myself further, to me, that's a recognition for development. And I think that's a sometimes overlooked element of a natural byproduct of setting a goal and being clear about a prize. And so I want to work hard because I want to win for the challenge of myself. So I feel better when I work harder too.
Well, and I will say the other part, if you're if you're winning at work, right, it's a better place to be. I mean, that just makes the recognition, become much easier. You're not as critical, right? It's okay if something's, in a lot of situations, I think a lot of us are coming from like a startup environment. You have to get to the place where you're recognizing that 85% is amazing, right? And not everything has to be perfect. And when you can really tie back and celebrate those wins as they're coming in, everybody's in hard stretches. It could be that you're in, your peak season, right? It could be you're in a seasonal and type of an environment of work, and it's very different than the rest of the 80% of your life. Like celebrating those wins in real time, and being able to showcase how that extra mile or that great idea that probably started out as a bad idea, right? How those things then tie back to what that outcome is. And it may not be the exact outcome you wanted, but it's a way better place than you were 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 quarters ago. And sometimes that doesn't always tie back to revenue, or sometimes that doesn't tie back to whatever goal it is that you're trying to meet. Sometimes it ties back to how productive your team is, or how much better they're cross collaborating with other teams. Sometimes that's where you get the really big win, and then you continue to build onto that.
Very much so. Another thing, I was a Bonusly customer, and the one thing that I really wanted to do at my previous organization was I wanted employees to stop just thinking that recognition was going to come top down, and I wanted them to utilize peer recognition. So the way that I found that recognition was done right and it was effective was that I went to Bonusly one day and I saw more people congratulating each other, cross-functionally, breaking down silos, talking more about how, because at that time we had feedback, how they could learn about different things in the workplace. And that's when I realized, hey, I think we're onto something. I think we are now getting to recognition where it's not just you tell me I'm great manager, where it's like, hey, team member, hey, across there, team member in ops or technology. I'm really enjoying what you're doing. I hear from the customer, I hear from my employees, and again, manager to manager, director to manager, it was all over the organization. And that's what we want to do. We want employees to think of recognition as not just from your manager. You can give recognition too to others. It's a two-way
Yeah.
street.
That's right. And not to I get that this is, with our friends from Bonusly, but Bonusly is one of my favorite tools for that exact reason, because you can really see where teams are coming together. You can, and it may be stuff that you didn't even know that was happening, right? And as a people leader, I may not know about this one critical situation that came up with a customer. I may not know that, in real time. But to be able to go in and, just shoot a few points here and there when and they're just and it's teams recognizing each other, and cross collaboration teams, and they're recognizing each other, and then just to go throw a couple Bonusly points out there to say, hey, I see you and I heard you, and thank you for all of that you all are doing. It ties back into building that level of trust with leadership, because a lot of times people will recognize each other, you may not see it, and then to be able to see that is one of my favorite parts of thinking about how teams are celebrating each other, but then how you can showcase it and build on top of it from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, there are a couple foundational concepts that I'll just summarize here before we move on to our next question that really influence that. When people are referencing Bonusly, they're talking about a recognition platform that's public. So the recognition is visible. It's not happening in silos, in individual conversations or one-off emails. It's visible to everybody in the company, and it's also 360. So it's mobilizing every single person across the company to catch people at their best which actually informs leadership in ways that they wouldn't have visibility otherwise. If you think about the traditional environment where you don't have a visible recognition platform, um, a manager only sees a very small sliver of the actual work and impact of an individual. Now, it may be easier to see it in roles that are very metrics driven, like sales and customer success. But the reality is, with a 360 approach to recognition and that global visibility across the company, you now make it possible for people to understand not only what's going on within their own teams, and that better empowers managers to work with their teams, coach and develop and encourage them, but it also helps people see what good looks like across the company and what's going on in the company. So a byproduct, which also impacts alignment to company objectives and initiatives that impacts outcomes, is that you have that visibility, that clarity of what good looks like and what's going on in the business and what's important. So those are elements that are not necessarily features that we talk about that are really critical to driving those business outcomes. We've talked about cross-functional engagement and recognition, and we've also talked about personalization. So a very straightforward way to think about this is really thinking in terms of, we have evolved in the workplace and where we do the work. We have companies that are wholly in office, companies that are hybrid, companies that are purely remote, where you may never meet someone in person throughout your career with that company. But then there's also this dynamic in the workforce now where 27% of the workforce is Gen Z, and we've got baby boomers leaving the workforce to the tune of 10,000 employees a day in the baby boomer category leaving the workforce. So we have generational dynamics with different expectations on how we provide recognition and feedback. So I'd love to hear from the panelists on how you tailor recognition to meet the varying needs of different generations, of diverse individuals in the workplace who may be at cross sections, you know, working moms, people in the sandwich generation. How do you think about recognition in the context of the personalization that needs to happen?
Yes, I'll go first. So I do things a little different, right? And I'll say this because I'm a millennial. I'm holding on to being a millennial. But I'm the oldest child. So I was raised by parents that were in their late 30s, right? So I got a lot of baby boomer in me. But then, I got younger kids, so I'm kind of, hanging out with them too. So I don't fit just one demographic. I have, my work may be a little bit of both. So what we do at my previous companies, I go in and I tell them on the first day, HR, how do you like to be recognized? And what I found is that there's such a drastic variation amongst employees and how they want to be recognized that if you look at them and you say, "Oh, you want me to make a big party for you," and they'll be like, "Absolutely not. I don't like that. I'll quit for that." So going right in and saying, when you do a good job, how do you like to be recognized? How do you feel about things even as small as birthdays? That's something that we used to do when I first started. Everybody's birthday, you get a cake, you got to eat the cake. Now it's like, hey, don't mention that or don't mention that. So just making sure that we're as a team that we're taking the step to find out, and then not only finding out what they enjoy, but then integrating them into, well, here's what we do. And I actually had my recruiters talk about how we recognize and reward employees during the interview because I wanted to be a match. Holly put in the chat, people feel good at work experiences better because people feel good at work, experience better relationships in the community, and that's 100% true. If you're aligned to the org culture and you feel good, you're going to feel good every day, and that's what I want to make sure that my employees feel, that this is exactly where I want to be because they'll be happier.
I love that you tied that connection to the unique experiences of people and unique preferences based on life experience, history. And one of my hot buttons is when people say our company's a family, my heart like breaks because family is such a supercharged word for so many people. And so, along that line is having processes in place as a people and culture team to actually honor those things that we hold dear as an organization. because the only thing worse than never asking and never recognizing is asking and making a verbal expectation or commitment and then not following through. And so with the number of our senior generation leaving the workforce, there could be some gaps that are going to be existing in the way we've always done things, the opportunities to do things differently, and the excitement about the opportunity becoming realized. And so with the work that I do with organizations is we focus on predictable patterns of behavior. And if we can have predictable patterns of behavior, what we actually end up doing is ensuring that we are reducing unnecessary and unproductive friction and stress. And the thing that is so critical is when people feel good at work, yes, it goes out into everyone they work with, but when they leave the office or when they shut their laptop down and leave their home office and go walk their dog, they are better within the community. And that's part of these predictable patterns. So recognition done right is recognition done meaningfully with a purpose and having some of these predictable patterns so that we don't surprise someone with a cake at their 50th birthday when they just want to be like, can I have an extra PTO day? So let's have that conversation, but be really thoughtful about it.
Yeah, Holly, and everybody, I think we're all hitting this main point of we need to be flexible and we need to listen and care. And that means from a leadership perspective or even a peer perspective, a little bit more about that person. I'm going to give you a real life example. Um, I had someone on my team at some point who literally has a very kind of back end type role, is not interested in being recognized at all. I may feel a little bit different about that. I'm like, wait, what about me? I did something really good. You say, but she did not. And she won a very, big award. And we went into a conference room, and the person that had recognized her for this role came in, who was also very much not wanting to be someone to speak in front of a lot of people and those types of things. We left them alone. They walked out both like so happy, like literally like tears of happy joy, because they got to share why why the work mattered so much. And then the other person got to like appreciate that and take that without having a million eyes on them, right? And what we did? We put, when we would normally have done some large cake and the thing and the all of the stuff, we just said, thank you, here's our winner. And they had an amazing celebration, and we left it at that. And they actually left the room while it happened, because that's how much they did not want to have like the attention on them. And for me, that was like one of those moments. Is it generational? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that sometimes it's getting to know your teams, and it's being able to feel comfortable as leaders or as peers to say, hey, this is really great that this person won this, but I can promise you right now, they may not want what you're trying to give. In fact, it may actually hurt versus the reward. So I guess for me, I think the big part is just understanding your team, understanding your culture, and doing what's right. Because again, it could be that rock that was a really great idea and everybody took time to order and write that, maybe with a Sharpie, or I don't know how you get that, but in my mind, it's a Sharpie. They spent the time to do it. They spent the energy in coming up with the idea, executing the idea, and it fell flat. Even one-on-one recognition can fall flat if not done right.
Makes sense. Perfect way to summarize that, Hope. And just for the record, I always want the cake. So David, if you can note that for future company celebrations.
By the way, same.
Yeah.
Not vanilla.
Nice.
At this point, I'll just take any cake.
I won't be picky. As long as I'm not baking it, I won't be picky. All right, so let's shift gears a bit. And I would love for the panel to share some wisdom on people who may be looking to either revamp or create new recognition programs. What are the first steps that you'd recommend people take to lay a strong strategic foundation?
I'll kick this one off. I think really think about what you want your intended outcome to be and work backwards. I think that's the most thoughtful way to go and do that. And another thing that I feel like recognition is a lot like swag. It's like very highly emotional, and everyone has an opinion. And it's also like it's not pizza, so not everyone's going to be happy, right? And if you can really get champions around what you're building and their voice being heard as you're building out these recognition programs, and if you're really, if you've got a large enough team and you have a multi-generational team, not everybody has the opportunity to have that. Some, organizations are smaller, or, some may just not be as diverse as being able to hit every single generation. Try to get those points of views in there as well. And I think the most important thing is tying it back to what your intended outcome is. Is it to truly recognize and reward? Is it to recognize value? Is it to recognize a level of productivity that is going to push your company forward? Is a combination of all of those things, or is it something completely different? And then also, I think, Holly talked about having, something tied back to the community. Is that part of your DNA? Do you want it to be part of your DNA? Is this a stepping stone to get there? So as you think about those intended outcomes, I would work backwards from there, and then, try to be, the other piece too is being able to validate it, right? Because recognition most of the time involves some sort of dollar and monetary moment that you have to go and budget for, that you have to go and ask for, that you have to actually get. So make sure that you have something that you can go and report back on. And some of this may be very metrics driven, some of it may be more feelings related. But if you can tie those two things and tell that data driven story to get to your point, you'll be in a really good spot.
Hope, you are so smart. Oh my gosh. So if you are like taking notes furiously as she said that, it sounds like there's different purposes for using recognition within your organization. And so you've got to get clear about what your purpose is, and you might have more than one. So if your purpose is achievement, then recognition has to be tied to meaningful metrics. If your purpose is culture and cohesion, then it should be tied to values and the behaviors of employees that are important for the community of that organization. And if your purpose is something different, then get clear and make those correlations. I love that she also brought up, Hope, I love that you brought up that using the data-driven response to get that money in your budget and that piece, because that was one of the parts that, again, I don't work for Bonusly, I'm just a big fan. But when I was a Bonusly customer, one of the things I loved is being able to look at the dashboard and see the engagement of my entire company. And then it gave me, as an HR leader, this opportunity to reach out to people who were at a lower level of engagement and gently remind them that their citizenship in our organization was absolutely critical. And without them, we were losing something. And so I love that you brought that up, Hope. You're so smart. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, I just thought of one other thing, and I'm just going to say it, and then I'm literally going to be quiet, okay? Like this, if you don't have anything today, like don't get scared. It does not have to be big. It can be something small. It can be something as small as, okay, maybe this is a little bit harder, depending on your role, but it's sending a note, like a real note, like when you write. I know that's like weird, but like you write it and then you send it in the mail. Like maybe someone checks their mail like once a week or once every couple weeks. I don't know, unless it's Amazon coming to my house. That's when I check the mail. But literally, it can be something as that. And it doesn't have to start in your entire organization. It can be something that you build organically inside your teams. And so, yes, we're talking about like large scale things and all of this stuff, but it does not have to start um, with a lot of money. It doesn't have to start with a massive strategy. It could literally start as something as a note. And maybe that's very meaningful to some people. Maybe that doesn't matter that much to some people. I personally think like if someone's going to take the time to do it, one thing that I do, just in case you guys are all ever if you're not, I've been working remotely for longer than I'd like to admit, but I'm really happy about that too. One thing that I always did when I would bring my teams together for, quarterly meetings or by, whatever it was, whatever kind of meetings that we were doing on the plane, I would write them a note and thank them in advance for everything that they were doing. And then I would give it to them when they went to go sit down at whatever meeting it was that we were at. Something really simple.
I don't know what I can add. I think we did a great job explaining things that we can do, but one thing that helped my recognition program at my last organization was ambassadors. So we did the metrics. We decided what we wanted the end result to be. We had the plan all drawn out. And then we had strategic, high engaged employees be the ambassadors to talk to their teams about the program. And I'll mention that because I had a program similar to Bonusly when I was younger, right? Early 20s, and never used it. Got some money thrown in, probably missed a couple of gift cards. As an adult, I'm like, wow, if I would have known about it, um, I probably would have used it. And don't just think that posting on the HR intranet or sending in an email is communication to your employees. Because when I was in finance, before I went in HR, we're not really reading it. We're hearing from our team members and then we're going in. So just making sure that you have an ambassador or two, or I would say 10% if you can do it, of your population of people that are actively trying to get employees engaged in the recognition program.
Love that. And I love what Tanya posted in the chat as well. Define the mission of Employee Engagement Committee and have process improvement strategies and communication optimization strategies. Email is generally not communication. Most people aren't reading it. And I love that you focus on mobilizing team members as part of the mission and part of the change. Super powerful. Also love that Hope called out, like, you don't have to go from 0 to 100 immediately. Crawl, walk, run is definitely advisable on anything that you do where you have the luxury of creating from scratch. So don't try to boil the ocean. Find what's meaningful in your organization and within your budget, and start from there and like build the momentum from there. Tiny steps in the right direction. Some of you, I wanted to ask about metrics, and you shared a little bit on as part of the answers to the previous question, but if we could just recap, and maybe we'll start with Nikisha. If we could just recap the metrics that you use to measure the success of your recognition programs, what are the variety
Right.
that you've used?
Yeah. So the second year of my organization, again, private equity focus. So a lot of the things that we want to show to a potential buyer is how we have improved employee engagement. So we looked at our first year employee engagement scores. We tied some of the key attributes that we scored in low, which one was we don't feel appreciated. We don't recognize wins, and we tied it to Bonusly, right? Not a Bonusly spokesperson, just utilize that for work. Um, but we tie it to Bonusly outcomes that we were able to derive from our analytics to see, yes, people are using it, yes, people are logging in, and then we use that next year employee engagement survey to see how we grew in those two areas. That was our key indicator, because employee engagement surveys, especially the anonymous ones, they're key for sales, because a company wants to buy a company that has engaged employees. They want to know that if I buy this product, everyone's not going to jump ship, or we got happy people here. All we have to do is win them over. So that's what we did. We looked at our employee engagement scores. We looked at utilization within the system. And we didn't just say, okay, we want 90%, we want 100%. We said we want a certain growth over time. So we looked monthly, right? I think employee engagement started the first year. I think we had maybe 30% of employees engaged. Hey, it's okay, it's all right. But at the end of the time there, we were at 90% employee engagement, right? And we had a lot of changes. We had to change reductions in forces, plus eliminations, restructures. But from employees being recognized, from us having good communication, from us being transparent, all we saw was our engagement going up.
Thank you, Nikisha. Holly?
So I love this question because I walked into a situation with an organization who was already a Bonusly customer, and I had never seen a tool that was so easy to use. And so where I saw a gap in the usage was one of the company values was teamwork. And what we had not done as an organization is defined behaviors that demonstrated these values. Well, because we had this awesome asset with Bonusly and we had some other ways of doing things in the organization, we tied some of these behaviors, these citizenship behaviors, to the values. One of the demonstrations of teamwork was using up all your Bonusly every month and giving them to your peers. What that allowed for us to do first is we explained and rolled out, hey, these values you're comfortable with, here's what they look like. So we gave some really clear expectations of citizenship behaviors in the organization. Then we let people know about a month later, hey, we have the ability to check these metrics. We're going to let you know if you don't use your Bonusly points, if you're not meeting the standard in all of these different categories as your citizenship behaviors, we're going to give you feedback on that. And then the third wave was holding people accountable. So it was an educational journey we took people on, and we thought that was a really fair way of doing it. The byproduct, these one-on-one conversations with employees who were moderately engaged or on that path to active disengagement, we knew who they were immediately, so we could get in front of it. So that pathway of disengagement from moderately disengaged to active disengagement usually ends with someone walking out the door. We don't want to do that. We don't want to lose these valuable souls who are making a contribution to our community. That is one of the best byproducts that I experienced from my point, was being able to check that dashboard, reach out to people and reel them back in, show, just demonstrating care. And I loved that part. So I think I answered the question, right?
I think you did. Yeah.
I don't really have anything to add except for Holly, you were talking about it, that, thinking about those metrics and the way of being able to check your engagement, using those, using that as like those check-in moments. What'd be really interesting is if you then could tie that back to performance review, right? And seeing, how, are they performing? Did they have any feedback that ties back to an engagement that, it may have been missed somewhere along the way? Are they in the right job? Are they doing those things? So sometimes that recognition and all of the data that we can get from recognition, or also on the flip side, not having recognition, maybe there's a team that's got a very low morale, like trying to dig in there, that probably ties back to some level of performance in those groups at some point. So I think this becomes, we start a conversation around recognition, but you can take that in so many different places to find areas of the things that are working really amazingly. And a lot of times, I bet you that ties back to some level of a leader or a team that just recognizes each other, versus a team that maybe there's a little bit lack of that in that team. And it's more just like, do the grind, do your job, go make it happen. Goodbye. Come back tomorrow.
Love that. Thank you all so much for taking the time to share your thoughts on the metrics to tie or to evaluate your recognition program on. And I think we walked away with some very insightful takeaways on that. I know that we're getting close to time, so I do want to flip back to the Q&A. And so I'll pull up the Q&A slide, and I think David is going to be facilitating this.
Yes, thank you so much, Deborah. And I will just pause and say thank you so much to our panelists. I mean, Deborah and I live and breathe recognition. We look at the data and stats all day and night. And so, this stuff is, stuff that we hear a lot, but just hearing from each of you, I mean, I've had goosebumps like half this webinar. And so thank you all so much. Just hearing your stories and just how you all really just do recognition right at your organizations has just been phenomenal. And so, like I mentioned at the beginning, my name is David and I am on the marketing team here at Bonusly. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't launch this poll. And so if you have heard anything in this webinar, if you want to just explore and talk to someone at Bonusly about how we can help organizations do recognition right, how we can help you, whether you're crawl, walking, or running, whether you're starting, whether you're revamping, just go ahead and answer that poll and we'll connect you with someone. This is absolutely one of our favorite topics. We love just partnering with organizations like Holly, Hope, and Nikisha's and just helping them make recognition a part of their culture and their companies. And so we'll leave that open just for a little bit, but we do have a few questions from the Q&A. And so we'll start with this first one. This one was sent in via email from registering, and I know you all may have answered it, but we'll ask it again just to make sure. But they asked, what is some advice for rolling out a social recognition program into an organization that historically the program was managed by the HR team? So what are some must-have resources, communication, etc.? I'm not sure if this person may not be in HR, but just would love any of your thoughts, including you, Debra, now.
So I'm going to put my other hat on. So I do have the majority of my background is all in HR and in the people space. But for the last year, I've been playing this game of being the head of marketing. And one of the things that I learned from the marketing space, it's very similar to HR, except for you don't have ER issues, well, at least on a good day. But if you are thinking about, how to do this, think of it as social media. Think of it as you're creating a moment. This is one piece of it, right? It doesn't have to be run by HR. Obviously, you would want, so, if something comes up that's like extremely wild, you would want to notify HR. That's my HR person coming out. But think of it in ways of you've got 4 pillars or 3 or 2, or there's one specific area that you want to reward people on. Think about how people are communicating with each other already inside your organization. Think about how people are communicating with each other outside of work, right? A lot of that ties back to very short videos, very short messages, very hashtags, things that you can go and do. You can do that in your, whatever tool it is that you may be using to message each other. It could be Slack, it could be Teams. There's a million ways that you can do it. The one thing that I would say is just be sure that you have guidelines around what you're doing if you're not doing it from like an HR point of view, and what the intended outcomes are. So just like you're launching a project, think of it as a project space, but in my mind, it becomes very social media-ish but maybe it's just socially inside your organization.
Great. We have another question from an attendee. And I think this was back a few questions ago when we were talking about making sure that we're paying attention to what our specific individuals at our company want when it comes to recognition. And so maybe just some clarity, but they're asking, so are you saying instead of doing company-wide recognition, it needs to be individual? And if it's individual, who is in charge of this?
I'll kick this off, but others feel free to chime in. We actually, we believe that there are 3 critical relationships in the workplace. So it's not either or, it's that you need to cultivate all 3 of them. The first is from the company to the employee, or between the company and the employee. You need alignment there. Otherwise, people will only follow their manager. Or not, right? But you need that connection. The second is peers with each other. So that's kind of the social aspect of recognition and creating those connections, relationship, and collaboration across the team. And the third is managers with their teams. So you can go very deep into each one of them, but in our experience, ensuring that you are covering all 3 of those in your program, even if you're crawling to begin with, is really critical, because with the absence of one, it's like a 2-legged stool or a 1-legged stool. It doesn't work out very well. And you need to actually think in terms of those 3 critical relationships.
And Debra, just to add on that, it's so, so true. And so having an expectation that an organization can achieve success with those 3 critical relationships without clear expectations and some framework and training, that's really unfair and unrealistic. So for those of you who are in leadership, considering this retooling or getting clear about those relationships, build some lead time in to put the process around it and equip those responsible individuals with clear expectations, tools, and skills so that they can do it. And remember, a lot of people don't just jump on a bike and start riding it. I mean, my 5-year-old did, but he's weird. So you want to make sure that you provide the appropriate safety rails and the training wheels really, and the check-ins so that you can cheer them on in their success as they're cheering on others as well.
Okay, this has nothing to do with thing. So my son's 10 and he can't ride a bike yet.
Totally normal.
And then
Totally normal.
listen, and then my best friend, her daughter is 13 and I mean, they're just not interested in riding bikes. I don't know. So maybe this is a generational thing that we should talk about another day. Is like, what are the other things like around recognition? Like I was like, I will give you $25 if you just try to ride this bike. Not interested.
Wow.
Wants to ride a scooter. Maybe I need to up the dollars. Anyway, I just thought
Does the offer stand for me, Hope? Because I would do a lot for $25. I would try to ride a bike. It would happen.
Just wants to ride a scooter. That's it.
That'll be a good icebreaker for our next webinar. Because I do have even friends, I'm in my 30s and they don't know how to ride bikes either. And so will be a great poll for the next time. But we have a couple more questions. So this one was sent in via email before the webinar. And so they asked, what is some best practices around balancing recognition and feedback? So I know Debra will have some thoughts on this one. And I know we have a whole webinar about feedback, but I thought I would ask that one.
Sure, I'll kick us off. Philosophically, I believe that recognition is a form of feedback. And so, think in terms of it being two sides of the same coin, but there is nothing that says, I care for you more than for me to give you feedback on an area that could help you do better, have a better experience, improve in an area that you're working on. And so from a practical perspective, creating a culture that is a feedback culture requires that you build trust. And one of the foundational ways to build trust is getting to know people. We talked a lot about, understanding your audience and your team. But another way to build trust is by seeing them as a whole person, seeing their full contribution, catching them at their best. If your feedback culture is predicated on only catching what they need to improve, then you have not created the foundation or the space for providing that constructive feedback. And so foundational to that is ensuring that you are navigating both sides of that coin. It doesn't mean that it needs to be one-to-one, and you don't need we used to call it a particular type of sandwich when you would give positive recognition, constructive feedback, and then positive recognition, like you had fluffy pieces of bread and then the meat of the conversation where people would lose track. That is not the recommendation. You have to create an environment where you can say what needs to be said, but part of what needs to be said is that I see you. I see you for the human that you are beyond the outcomes that you produce. And I seek to catch you at your best, but also am here to catch you when you stumble and help you with that as well.
I love it. Like I said, we could do a whole webinar on feedback, and I'm sure we may one day. We may have time for one more question, and this one is from an attendee, and they ask, how can you encourage people who are not inclined to engage and are perfectly happy just chugging along? They don't want to engage more than they have to.
Sounds like a culture challenge here. There's probably something under the surface there that would benefit from a little care and attention. Some people just don't like other people, and that's cool if that's your culture. If your culture of your organization requires a level of interaction and care, then there may be something going on, and there may be a need to, again, take a look at that. I wouldn't do anything rash. I would look at your company culture. I would look at your proclaimed values. I would look at the steps. Have you taken the appropriate steps to express the expectation for citizenship in your organization? And everyone's motivated by something. If there's someone who truly doesn't want to engage in any way, it may be important to give them an opportunity to express their motivation or discover it. They may need a coach, they may need a friend, they may need, who knows what they may need, but it may not be your organization too. And so if that's what you end up with, don't feel sad. Just be really fair.
Yeah, I like what you said, Holly, because I know personally, sometimes I just don't want to engage. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
me. They're on the organization. I'm perfectly happy. Um, at work, and there's nothing wrong with me, and as an HR leader or any kind of leader, you shouldn't say, oh my gosh, something's wrong with that person. I think we need to be holistic and say, well, okay, we're going to do some things. Some people are going to enjoy it. Some people are going to be neutral. Some people are going to hate it, and be okay with that. You never know. That person might have other things to do after work. They may be going through something. A lot of us are in that sandwich generation. So just being okay with not everyone's going to love something. That's something that I had to learn as I got older. Um, and I like what the unpeople time. I am an outgoing introvert. I am known for the goodbye, right? I'm at an event and you never see me go. I'm out of there. I'm home. I'm not interested. And that's okay. Nothing's wrong with me. I just need my alone time.
I love that. And I think that's a great note to end on. And I will say again, Holly, Hope, Nikisha, I could not have dreamed of a better panel. I was telling the panelists before we started that, I emailed them all, and within a minute or two, they all responded and said, yes, let's do it. And Deborah and I are just very happy that we got some friends on this webinar. I did share their LinkedIns in the chat. I will encourage you, please connect with all of them. I connect with all four of them, and they post phenomenal content. They are involved anywhere and everywhere, whether it's Forbes articles. I know Nikisha has one coming out soon, other webinars, other events. So please connect with them. We'll also share their LinkedIn's in the email following up. But you will just continue to just gain some insights and knowledge from following them. And with that, I will say thank you all so much. I know we are 1 minute over, but we hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.